Hi there. I just heard our very presidential President Trump, in his most presidential voice, announce his nominee for the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. That was no surprise. Now, we Republicans and the Republicans in the Senate have to move quickly on this. They've already heard her testify for her previous nomination, which I believe was for the 7th District Court. They've already heard it. They already know her. And interestingly enough, this is the first time where you've had a situation, as far as I know, where every single senator, you know how they're going to vote. Except maybe Joe Manchin. Yeah, I don't really know how he'll vote. But you know how they're going to vote. So what is it that she has to say or do? And also, any attacks they try to do on her, everybody expects the attacks. So nobody's going to pay attention to the attacks. And some of the attacks are ridiculous. I mean, really ridiculous. And there'll be those that are worried about Roe v. Wade. But you know, I'm sorry, the left is just all over the map now, okay, with BLM, and they're all focused on that, and then you got the coronavirus. I just don't think you have this very strong female-centric pro-choice community that's going to argue for this. I don't. That time is past. I mean, not when you're supporting black criminals who attack women in the BLM riots. I mean, seriously? You care about women? So, no. I think this will go through very fast and before the election. Now, let me just, okay. Last week I said that I believe there's a chance that Romney will vote yes, and I was right. But I want to point out something else that Michael, also known as Ghost in the Machine, he pointed out that Romney would have to vote for conservative justice because of the state of Utah. If he wants to get reelected, I think it's in 2022, he has to vote. Okay. I was basing my judgment on the difficulty of being the lone person outside of your group. And that's got to be hard. That had to be hard for Romney because he was sort of persona non grata in Republican circles. And that's very hard for people to do. So I thought, no, he's not going to do it. He's going to vote just to get some cred back in the Republican Party because he lost so much of it with the whole impeachment fiasco. But, you know, I know a lot of you worry, and of course we worry. I worry about a lot of things, but please, I've been a Democrat. I would not want to be a Democrat now. They are all over the map. They are losing it. They're having temper tantrums. Now, let me tell you something I agree with regarding Nancy Pelosi. Biden should not debate, but he will. He's committed. Because I think that some of the people who hate Trump and don't want to vote for Trump, they don't really know how bad Joe Biden is. Because that's kept out of the news. And everybody is going to watch, just out of curiosity. They want to see the show. Is going to watch this debate. And there's a few things that set Joe Biden off. And they'll give him all kinds of drugs, probably Adderall. But he clearly is doing a drug thing because he's got all these lids. Lid, it's a new word. I don't know if it's an acronym or where it came from. But he can't get out much. And when he doesn't have his stimulants, oh my God, he's so bad. He is so bad that I don't think people see it. So you're going to have a hard time, like young people. I mean, maybe they hate Trump, but they're going to look at that and go, what? I mean, so they should find a way, if I were a Democrat, to not have him. So you have to ask yourself, let me just get back to Nancy Pelosi for a minute, because she's very smart politically. And yet, to us, she sounds so extreme, so ridiculous, so dismissive of President Trump. But remember where, was it 2 years ago? When she was going to lose her leadership position. A lot of the people who ran for offices, I'm not in the House, said I'm not voting for her. So she was in real danger of losing her position. But how did she get that position of leadership back? By becoming very, very extreme in her dislike of Trump. Because remember, a long time ago, she said, let's not, we really shouldn't impeach. She tried to calm down the impeachment talk, but she changed. And why did she change? Because her base is rabidly anti-Trump. And the way she got back in favor of the base and maintained her leadership was just to be as extreme and ridiculous sounding, where she tears up the speech during the State of the Union, and now she says, oh, this or that. But remember, always remember, she's actually politically pretty smart. But she'll maintain her leadership in the rabid wing of the Democratic Party, but to the rest of us, she looks ridiculous. Remember there was that old fable about crying wolf? I mean, that's really what the Democrats have done. They're so upset about everything. So when they're so upset about everything, after a while you just, whatever. And I'm thinking, so many of the actions of what they're doing are backfiring. For example, they were actually more effective when they were sotto voce, below the surface. But now we know what they're doing. Take, for example, the critical race theory stuff. I mean, it has been going on a long time in schools, and most people didn't know. Like, I'm thinking about how all these companies, for example, and universities have like a vice president of diversity. Well, it wasn't too long ago. I was at a luncheon at Caltech, and I sat next to a woman, and she gave me her card, and she is the new vice president of diversity at Caltech. And I didn't really know what that was. So all this stuff had been going on, and I mean, she would do that now. I would say, yeah, what do you do? So if you have a vice president of diversity, what are they going to do? Well, they got to do something related to diversity. So they're going to have these critical race theory workshops. They're going to hire these people. They're going to do something, okay? I mean, you really might as well call it the vice president of racism. So, I mean, I can think of so many things now that I would challenge people on. Because even since I did my first major video about why I didn't believe Christine Blasey Ford, there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't know. And I was pretty much keeping up with the news. I was a Trump supporter. But everybody knows what they're doing now. And everybody's horrified. We're all horrified. But that's how we get it changed. That's how we get it changed. So it's good. It's all good. Okay? We know they're for tearing down statues. We know they're against the U.S. They hate this country. They really do hate this country because they hate themselves. It's a sickness, people. It's a sickness. They hate themselves. They hate humanity. That's the underlying thing that drives that. Now, speaking of that, Judith Matthew, thank you. Last night when I was watching on YouTube President Trump's rally, which I love to watch those rallies, but I got a note from her. Because in my comments, whenever you leave a comment, it pops up on my phone. So I actually see all the comments. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's like I have no time to read it right then or to respond. I have time to read it. I read it every time. But I have no time to respond. But she mentioned that I should watch this video by a walkaway video by a Georgia H. And to be honest, I really wanted to continue watching Trump's rallies because I just love them. But I thought, she was so convincing, Judith. You were so convincing in what you said. So I watched it, and it was very good. I'm going to leave a link, a pinned comment to watch her video because she's a young woman. It's her walkaway video. She's very smart and very insightful. because what she basically describes, you really get into the critical race theory teachings. And even though she's, I think in her heart, she was already so it's not the same as it was for me. And in her heart, she really was already a conservative. But she got caught up in all this. And she's a teacher and an ER doctor. It's a fabulous video. Because she tells you her thinking process and what made her change. And she speaks so well. Beautiful vocabulary. Beautiful woman, too. So I encourage you to watch it. And if you have younger people, you might want to send them to it. I mean, if you send them my video, they think, older woman. Yes, okay, I'm fine, but whatever. I'm still older. But they can relate to her. Because she also talked about what she thought about AOC and why AOC was sort of appealing, but then why she wasn't. So it's very, very interesting. And Judith, thank you. So I will do that link, but in case you don't get the link, her name is Georgia H. And something about why I left the Democratic Party. I mean, she really should have titled it something different because you really need to watch it. I mean, that's kind of a bland statement, but she's probably new to this. But anyway, I subscribe to her channel because I think she'll be a star. She's very good, very good. But notice in it, I don't think she said anything about supporting President Trump yet because she had been filled with how terrible Trump was for so long. And you have to give people time. You have to give people time. When they are changing, I remember that so well. She'll get there. She'll get there. But it's hard to say something like that. It's hard to switch over. When you've been one way for so long, it's hard to switch over completely right away. I know, it took me a while. And you don't want to rush it. You don't want to push someone. I mean, she's certainly not going to vote for Biden, and I'm sure she'll vote for Trump. But she's maybe not just ready to speak her support for him. But anyway, Judith again, thank you. And again, her name is Georgia, like the state, H. You'll enjoy that a lot. So here's some other thoughts I've had this week. Oh, I've had so many thoughts this week. There's so much to talk about. But one of the things, I just thought about how all these actions that are going on, how much they're backfiring. Even advertisements are backfiring, okay? Like, I'm always been, wanting to see women succeed and things like that. But with all this going on, I resent things being pushed at me. So there's a program, I've watched programs like this before about, women getting the right to vote. And I just I can't get myself to watch it right now. There's one about Harriet Tubman, a fabulous abolitionist. I can't get myself to watch it because I resent it being pushed on me. I resent that when I got a book from Audible, they have a thing about, this is audible.com, where you read listen to the books. We regret the passing of, the wonderful Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's like, I don't need to see that. I don't like it when they push stuff at me. I feel a little rebellious about that. Curious as how you all feel. But when it's too heavy-handed, and I think the tech companies, they're going to be in big trouble. They're too heavy-handed. We're going to get them. Trump's already started this whole process with the DOJ. He's really doing a lot. I just so love our president. And so you may not be realizing the things that he's doing to push this along. And if we get back the House, there's a lot we can do. And there's an activated base now. There's a strong activated base of Republicans. And the thing that's interesting is the Republican Party has changed. It has changed. It's the party of normal people. So the only way you can keep Democrats, normal people Democrats, is to kind of make sure they don't hear from people like this. Make sure that they think, oh, we're terrible, okay? You can't look at that. You can't talk to that person. They're all this, they're all that. That's the only way they can do it. But when they see that there's normal people, all you have to do is open up a crack, and it's usually something, and then they start, well, let me see what else is going on. But anyway, in terms of what these senators, what the Democrats have been doing, like for example with the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, there's all kinds of Senate courtesies and protocols, but we don't have to do that anymore. Not after the Kavanaugh hearings. They're so bad and they become so extreme that we don't have to afford them the same courtesies. We don't have to do it. It's kind of like what President Trump said. I liked what he said. He said after Joe Biden, Joe Biden just says these flat out lies. When I say he says it in his ads and some of the things he says. It's so bad. It's so bad. I would be embarrassed to be a Democrat right now. To have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on the ticket. Because Kamala Harris is bad too. These are people that on their own never could get any support. They never could. Joe Biden, he just seemed like the safe choice. And once, Clyburn got him, they thought, well, we'll go ahead and get Joe Biden. But they didn't know how bad he was. And he's got to be on drugs to do it. Now, here's the interesting thing. He's got to be on drugs. And it's probably Adderall. But what that does is it makes him too energetic and too angry, okay? So he's not the sleepy Joe, he's the angry Joe. And he kind of loses it. He's not thinking right. So coronavirus has killed 200 million people. He emphasizes it. You can understand sometimes people slip, make a mistake. They say 200 million when they should have said 200,000. But it's the way in which he said it. And he's a climate arsonist, because we haven't gone on the new Green Deal. We have hurricanes, we have floods, we have fires. This is the party of science. They are so not the party of science. They are so not the party of science. So, let me say something about that. Because this is, as you know, why I originally walked away. It was the whole climate change issue, which I was very involved in. In terms of being interested in. And so it took a long time. Because part of what it is that you think of yourself as being in a certain club. Like I was in the science person club. But now I realize, oh my God, okay. Just think about climate change for a minute. You notice how it's not really scientists that are talking about it right now. There's a few like a Michael Mann or a Gavin Schmidt at NASA who'll be some loudmouth about it. But really, there's not that many scientists that are talking about it right now. It's now turned over to people like Jane Fonda, like Greta Thunberg, that little kid, and reporters and politicians, okay? And scientific groups. Now remember, whenever you have a scientific group, like the whatever group, or a magazine, the people that get to the top are the activists, okay? They're not the regular, it's not like they take a vote, okay? What does every scientist think here? Because they don't. That's not what happens. So the activists, they're not really doing good science because they have all this time to get on these committees and boards and stuff, and they then issue a statement. And I happen to know, because I particularly followed it for the American Physical Society, which was physics. They were horrified, physicists, with the statement that the APS put out about climate change. I said, no, you can't do it. And they tried desperately. They did as much as they could to see if they could get that reversed, but they couldn't. So whenever there's like an organization that says something, that's not necessarily what it is. But you get a good scientist, Now, what they will do sometimes, like when this whole thing about the fires, you had some UCLA scientist, and all he said was that, well, it could be partly due. I mean, he'll do some little wiggle room, because he doesn't want to anger Democrats, but he doesn't want to say anything conclusive. But they won't come out and say, oh, it's caused by that. They won't. They just won't, because they'd be laughed at by their colleagues. I mean, that would be very, very bad science. So how does a person who isn't interested in following the science, how do they evaluate? What do they do? Okay? So here's some simple rules. I was trying to think, because most people can't do it. You hear this is what the experts say, okay? But usually what happens, ask yourself, is there a political motivation behind this in some way? So let's say you're reading about black holes. Well, there's really nothing political about that. So probably what you're reading has validity. Something about chemistry, yeah, probably what you're reading has validity. Astronomy, whatever. You know, when you think about stuff like that, there's no political motive. There's no financial motive. You know, so you look at those things, because if you don't, you can be misled. But one of the things that's very interesting, and you will all see this, so take, for example, the whole Black Lives Matter. You have had people think that there's a huge number of unarmed black men who are killed by the police. Now, those of us who know Heather McDonald's work and others, we know that's not true. We know the numbers don't support that. But if you ask the average Democrat in the street, or just the average person, they think it's huge. They think it's huge, okay? They've got this distorted view of what's going on. Well, if you ask people like, what do you think global warming is? How much warmer do you think it's gotten? Or what do you think the sea level rise is? They think it's a lot more, and it's not. I mean, anybody who looks, one of the things that's very much interested in me is the Earth's history. And so there is no way to know. We have a current tiny bit of warming. It's not that much. It's not as much as the medieval warm period. It's not as much as the Holocene. This is all since the last glacial ice age. You know, from 20,000 years ago, that was the peak, and then it got warmer. But we have had it warmer, okay? And those were used to be called optimums, because it was actually better for people when it was warmer. And certainly before our current ice age, which is like the last 2.5 million years, CO2 levels were much, much higher, and life was vibrant. So let me just say something about CO2. We should never, I mean, I don't like any of these schemes that try to lower the CO2. CO2 is not pollution. It is not pollution, okay? Pollution is smog. CO2 is what you exhale. Okay? So what you exhale, so if I get, you, okay, if I was right next to you, okay, that is about 38,000 parts per million. The ambient level is something like 420 parts per million. So it's roughly 100 times as much when I exhale. Now, that tells you right there, it's not harmful to your health, not at all. And when you have more CO2, so right now it's like 420 parts per million, I think it should be at least like 1,000 parts per million. It's been much higher in the past. When mammals were evolving, you know, life was fine, life flourished. Because plants get greener, they like CO2, it's like plant food, you could call it that. It'd be like oxygen for us. And they need less water. So all this BS you hear, not true, about, oh, CO2. They just picked something and they thought, I mean, we were at very low levels pre-industrial. We went through a period when it's very low, because you get to a point and then plants can't survive. So it's good. So One of the clues is looking at the temperature rise, which is roughly 1 degree centigrade since 1880 for a global temperature. 1 degree. And it is very, 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 very hard to get global temperature. I don't even trust it, but let's say it's true. So what? So what? Think of the swings you get from the dead of winter to whatever. So what is the most important thing you should do if it's warmer or colder or more extreme? You better have a good electricity grid. You better have heating. You better have air conditioning. The last thing you want to do is muck with that. And then look at the other thing is the number of COVID deaths. We all know, those that are following the numbers, 200,000 cases, like some healthy person's walking along and they die of COVID. It appears that what is happening, most of the people have a very good survival rate. I don't even care about the cases, because this whole thing about how they're measuring cases, that's very suspicious. We've never just taken, if you have no symptoms, you do not have it. There's something wrong with these PCR tests or whatever. When people are sick, they're sick, okay? Fine. But the number of COVID cases, it's like under 10,000 where people apparently just died of that. But most cases were, unfortunately, people were older. So you probably got some time taken off their life of where they would have lived. Okay, that's sad, but not worth shutting things down. Oh, don't you love Ron DeSantis, Florida governor? What are the chances, Gloria Ingram asked him, that we'd ever shut down? 0. So he's just flat out saying it. Man, that state is looking good. Looking good. I love California. I love my home. But with the increases in taxes and these shutdowns, it's just maddening. It's just maddening. So one the simple rules are, if there are numbers to try to scare you, just be suspicious. What's the narrative? Cheryl Atkinson said that one time. She said, always ask yourself, what's the narrative being promoted here? Oh, and another thing is, if you find that people that don't go along with the narrative are attacked, just attacked, okay? It's not where the science is argued, but they're simply attacked. They're name called, they're a denier, they're this, they're that. Okay. That's a red flag. Nobody calls names to somebody who thinks, something different about the Big Bang. Nobody cares, okay? And so also, if action has to happen, okay, otherwise dire things are going to happen. And here's another thing, notice a lot of these things are computer projections. If they're doing computer projections, it's BS. Just BS, okay? Nobody knows. There's so many different interacting things. If somebody's saying dramatic action has to be taken now to fix this, ignore it, okay? Ignore it. And, it's an interesting thing. I have found that also goes for your personal life. If somebody's forcing you into a decision too quickly, and you have some doubts, don't be forced. Okay, because if you have doubts, those doubts are there for a reason. And you need to, don't be rushed into something you're not ready for. So let's get to Gavin Newsom. Oh my gosh. I almost feel like throwing up when I see that guy. It might be an age thing, because when I see somebody that's young and doesn't know diddly, and he's just ruining our beautiful state. It's like, how dare he? How dare he? California's such a fabulous state. They keep wanting to raise taxes, and then with all the stuff going on, he makes an executive order. First of all, if you're going to do something this insane, it should be passed by the legislature and then signed by the governor, even though I think it's terrible. But he, with executive order, he takes the time when all these things are going on that he needs to take care of and says there's going to be a ban on new gas-powered cars by 2035 in California. Well, first of all, that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I'm never going to drive an electric car. There's so many things wrong with that, okay? Again, these top-down orders about the economy. Bad, bad, bad. So he wants to do that. And he wants to weaken the electric grid. Oh my God. He wants to weaken the electric grid. Why would you want to have, when you have rolling blackouts, and you want to have transportation dependent on the electric grid? No way, okay? And I don't like electric cars. I mean, remember, I was with a company that my husband and brother-in-law started, Rosen Motors. It was a big company building a hybrid electric vehicle. I was a vice president there. It was my last real job. Where, when I say real, you know, one of those 10-hour a day kind of jobs. So I know something about the automobile industry. Anyway, he is so bad. It's not going to happen, but it just annoys the heck out of me. Now, here's another thing. As you know, I'm super annoyed about masks. And I've seen some videos, maybe you've seen them, about like in Moscow, Idaho, and in Ohio, where the police are arresting people, taking them in because they don't wear a mask. That's another reason why I like Ron DeSantis. He said even local governments cannot arrest or fine people who don't want to wear masks. I mean, we are grown-ups. We should be able to decide that ourselves. This mask insanity has to stop. But you know, it's not that bad here. California's pretty messed up. But the police are good. They pretty much said right from the get-go, we're not doing that. I called this one, I wrote him an email and then he called me back and left a message. There's a Santa Monica police officer. He would come to the Santa Monica Canyon Civic Association board. And somebody was saying, you know, the people are going to the beach. They're not supposed to go to the beach. And can't the police do this or that? So I wrote him and I said, if you do that, you're just going to lose support from the people who support you, like myself. If you start, you know, harassing people about that. And he left me a very long message and said, oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So I walk. There's these signs in Santa Monica, you know, on the park that I go walk in, overlooks the beach. There's all these signs, you know, masks required. I've gone right by police officers, Santa Monica police. I wave. I mean, they're not doing it. So the police can say, I don't like this thing. Well, the police are just following. The police chief, they just have to say, we're not enforcing that, okay? They can do that. So I'm mad at the police that don't do that. It's a little harder for the ones down below, especially if they say you have to go and do it. But certainly in terms of citations where they're just going around and, oh, let me get this person. They have the judgment call, right? You see that with the California Highway Patrol. They can decide to let that speeding car go by and get that speeding car. They can make that judgment call. But the police chiefs have to say no to the mayor. If you've got some tyrannical mayor that's going to say you've got to arrest people for this, that is just disgusting. It's just disgusting. So police chiefs, you got to stop doing that. You got to stop doing that. Now, you can, let me say one more thing. Well, probably not one more, probably a few more things. By the way, I moved the camera a little bit, so I have mirrors everywhere in this house. So it looks like I have 2 backyards. Because look that way, I can see the backyard. Look this way, I can see the backyard. And I have glass. So it's mostly mirrors and glass everywhere. I love it. So it's kind of like I'm outside. But anyway, this whole mail-in ballot thing, I think it's really going to hurt the Democrats. Now, we have to be on our guard. They're going to try to cheat. But come on, okay? If a lot of Democrats vote mail-in ballots, a lot of those ballots will get thrown out. So they're now trying to get their Democrats to go to the polls. Because all we Republicans are going to the polls, unless we absolutely can't, like if we have to do absentee ballot. But we're going to the polls. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to the polls. There's no way I would do that mail-in ballot stuff. No way. So, Steve Turley talked about that. And, you know, Trump has laid the groundwork. He's so smart. By just constantly hammering home about how bad these mail-in ballots. And, you know, they're getting all upset. They're, you know, but the thing is they get upset about everything and nothing. So after a while, you just sort of like don't pay attention. So I think that's going to work in our favor. But all this stuff about, oh, it's going to take weeks. No, it's not going to take weeks. Well, I'm hoping it will not take weeks. So I just want to say 2 more things. One is, like, why I became a conservative. Because first, like I said, it was mostly the climate change issue. But I found something true in my personal life and also in my political viewpoints. And that is, be wary of getting rid of something that's working for you. I mean, this is kind of a silly example, but I had one of those zero gravity chairs that I used to like to take a nap in. It was like so comfortable. But then I saw a massage chair, and I thought, I'm gonna get the massage chair. So I gave the zero gravity chair to my brother, and I got the massage chair, and then I found out, oh shoot, I can't take a nap in this thing. I can't rest in it. It's uncomfortable. It makes too much noise when the massager is going. I didn't like it. I thought, why did I get rid of that zero gravity chair? I love that zero gravity chair. Don't get rid of something that you love, thinking this next thing will be better. So I got rid of the massage chair, gave that to my other brother, he loved it, and I got a new zero gravity chair. I don't take my naps very often anymore, but when I just want to lay down and look through the skylight, it's a great thing. But I also realized that about politics and society. You see, a lot of these radicals, they want to change society. They want to change it dramatically. But what is it really going on with them? They're bothered inside themselves. This is my view. And so they think if they change the outside world, make some kind of thing happen, it's going to fix things for them. But as a conservative, I find small changes are better, and changes that work with human nature. So you have small changes, but no big changes top down. If you look through history, that's always been the case. Oh, by the way, this Georgia H, that was Alex Berenson pointing out. I really like him. He was on, I think it was Tucker Carlson. But he was talking about how people, they want to have the mask now because people are out and they need to have something. It's like a talisman, like, I'm doing something about this, okay? Even though it really doesn't do anything, they feel like they're doing something. And so they want to force it on everybody else. But I don't like big changes top down. And let me just say something about all this talk about, I just find it ludicrous. And there are a lot of Democrats that just repeat this talking point, at least on Twitter, that Trump is responsible for all these COVID deaths. But they never exactly say what they would have done differently or what a Biden administration would do. But one thing is very clear is that they would have upped the federal bureaucracy in some way, put more control in Washington, D.C. Whereas Trump, like a good federalist, he helped the governors. And I realize more than ever, I like that. I like that we have all these different states. I like that I can look to Florida and they can see what they're doing there versus what we're doing in California or what we're doing in these other states. And that's why they get so upset, because people are going to see it's okay in Florida. People are going to see that nothing bad happens. And then they're saying, why aren't you doing that for our state? So it's like you have 50 different experiments going on. That's good. Trump, I think, is the first president, I mean, I'm not aware of any other president, when there was a national crisis of some sort where he didn't increase the size of the federal government. I mean, every other crisis we've had has resulted in a big increase in the federal government. That hasn't happened here. Wow. If Trump gets a fair shot in terms of historians of the future, and they're not all leftists, what he has done is so amazing. So amazing. Now, you can stop if you're not interested. You can get a little science here. Because another exciting thing that happened this week, I think it's exciting, I love this stuff, was that we had the equinox on Tuesday, September 22nd. Now, I think many of you know what the equinox is. It's, well, on the calendar, it's when we change from, when fall starts, if you're in the northern hemisphere. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's when spring starts. So I've always been interested in the equinox. Now, that's Greek for equal nights. And in theory, I say in theory, and here's the Earth, people. Here's the Earth, okay? So as the Earth goes around the sun, it's spinning on its axis. But everywhere in the Earth, everywhere on the planet, on the day of the equinox, and that again was Tuesday, you have 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of darkness, okay? Equal nights. But that's only in theory. I learned a new word this year that people are trying to do. Now, okay, before I get into that, if you remember your trigonometry, if you ever took trigonometry, okay, you can look at seasons as kind of a sine wave. And if you take the derivative of the sine wave, when you're going through the equinox, like you're going from the summer to the winter, and you're going through fall, the rate of change is greatest at the equinox. So everywhere in the world, and you basically have the amount of sunlight you get every day is changing by 2 minutes a day. Now, at the solstices, which means in Greek, sun standing still, that's in June and in December, it basically doesn't change for maybe like 11 days. You don't really see a change. I know, because I have those little apps on my phone. I like to see how much sunlight I'm getting. So I kind of studied it this week. Oh, I love doing this kind of stuff, take my mind off politics. But one of the things, and I hadn't really understood this before, because I look on my little thing and it's like, well, I'm not getting 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. Getting that today, Saturday, 4 days later. Today is the equinox for me, okay? I'll tell you why. I'm gonna learn something new. Now, it's not the equinox for Christopher Van. Christopher, are you listening? He's in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, his equinox was what you would call the spring equinox. Even though I refer to it as September, because I used to go to South Africa. For 16 times I went on the equinox. So I learned to start calling it the March equinox and the September equinox, because of course it's opposite in the southern hemisphere. But his equinox, where he had 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of night, that occurred 4 days before September 18th. And this will happen to us when it's our spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. The equal days and equal nights will occur about 4 days before. And why is that? Why is that? Because, you know, you're still, in terms of the sun, that's because there's two reasons for that. Two reasons. One is atmospheric refraction. Because what's happening with the atmosphere, and that's why it's not the same everywhere, is this, let's say the sun's here, but, well, it's really here, the light bends, so you see it as being up here. So the sun is actually appearing to be above the horizon when it's not. And that's generally about one sun size, which is half a degree, which is, by the way, the same size as the moon, which is pretty cool. That's why you get total solar eclipses occasionally. Okay, that's another reason. That's one reason. So that gives you more sunlight than you normally would have. And also, the sun is not a point, it's a disk. Because if you notice, when they count when is sunlight, and if you're out watching the sun, let's say it's dark, and you know, it's starting to get dawn, but when the sun comes over the horizon, it doesn't have to come completely over the horizon, just a teensy bit, right? As soon as it just, there's light. It's bright. You can't look at the sun at that point. It's too bright. Likewise, when it goes down, if you're watching a sunset, you don't count it as a sunset until the sun is gone all the way down. You know, that last little bit. So all in all, adds about 8 extra minutes to the day. So pretty much everywhere in the world, you're going to always have a little bit, not everywhere in the world, obviously it's not, if it's winter, but overall, you're going to get more daylight than nighttime. Pretty cool, huh? So that's called, I just learned it this year, the equinox. And you can look it up. But, so right now, and I checked, I am having exactly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. I love it. I love the change of seasons. I mean, the light change. I don't get snow or anything, but I like it. I like waking up and it's a little darker. Anyway, I love this stuff. And it's been fun. And I almost got to answer everybody's comments this week, but not quite everyone. I felt bad about Marianne and Eric because they always leave me nice comments. And a lot of times I think, oh, I'm going to answer that. I have so much to say. And then more comments come in. So I kind of do it in a random way how I answer, but I have some of my favorites who just always leave me a comment. And new people too. I love that too. So, have a great week. This is a little earlier today. And I will talk to you next week.